Ladies and gentlemen, today, I bring your attention to one of the most contested pieces of land in Africa, Migingo Island. This tiny rocky island, covering less than half the size of a football field, has been at the center of a territorial dispute between Kenya and Uganda for years. Despite its small size, Migingo holds significant geopolitical and economic importance, mainly due to its rich fishing waters. Migingo Island is a tiny but strategically significant piece of land located in Lake Victoria, which is the largest freshwater lake in Africa and the second largest in the world by surface area. Despite covering only about 2,000 square meters, half the size of a football field, the island has attracted significant attention due to its location and economic potential. Lake Victoria is bordered by 3 countries: Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. However, Migingo Island is situated in the eastern part of the lake, relatively close to the Kenyan mainland but near the Ugandan border. This geographic positioning has been a major cause of dispute, as both Kenya and Uganda lay claim to it. From a geographical standpoint, Migingo's rocky and uneven terrain makes it an unlikely place for human settlement, yet it has become one of the most densely populated islands in the region. The island is covered with tightly packed iron sheet houses, barely leaving any open space. The high population density is mainly due to the economic opportunities provided by the lake's fish-rich waters. The waters surrounding Migingo Island are particularly deep, which makes them ideal for breeding the Nile perch, one of the most sought-after fish species in the region. The abundance of this fish has turned the island into a major fishing hub, attracting hundreds of fishermen from Kenya, Uganda, and even Tanzania. Due to overfishing in other parts of Lake Victoria, these deep waters have become even more valuable, increasing the island's importance in the region. Beyond its economic and political significance, Migingo Island also highlights some critical issues in African geopolitics. Its location within the lake, which is shared by multiple nations, demonstrates the challenges of defining borders and water bodies, especially when colonial-era maps and agreements are unclear. This lack of clear demarcation has fueled disputes, making geography a core issue in the ongoing conflict over the island. In addition, the geographical isolation of the island presents logistical and governance challenges. The limited space and resources make it difficult to establish permanent infrastructure, yet it remains an essential location for trade and economic activity. Despite being so small, the strategic position of Migingo Island in one of Africa's largest lakes has given it outsized importance in regional affairs. The territorial dispute over Migingo Island is one of the most well-known border conflicts in East Africa. Both Kenya and Uganda claim ownership of the island, leading to years of tensions, diplomatic disagreements, and even minor conflicts between the two nations. The root of this dispute lies in historical claims, unclear colonial-era boundaries, and economic interests tied to the island's fishing resources. Historical claims and colonial boundaries. The conflict over Migingo Island can be traced back to the colonial period, when the British controlled both Kenya and Uganda. During this time, the borders between the two territories were not clearly defined, especially within Lake Victoria, which is shared by Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Some historical maps place Migingo within Kenyan waters, while others suggest it belongs to Uganda. This lack of a definitive colonial-era boundary has created confusion, allowing both nations to justify their claims over the island. The situation became more complex after independence, as both Kenya and Uganda inherited these ambiguous colonial borders. For many years, the island was largely ignored because it was uninhabited. However, once fishermen began settling there in the early 2000s due to the rich Nile perch population, the question of ownership became a major political and economic issue. Kenyan and Ugandan perspectives. Kenya argues that Migingo Island is within its maritime boundaries, citing old maps and historical fishing rights. Kenyan fishermen have long operated in the waters surrounding Migingo, and the country believes the island rightfully belongs to them. The Kenyan government has often demanded that Uganda withdraw its security forces from the area, claiming that their presence amounts to an illegal occupation. On the other hand, Uganda insists that Migingo lies within its territorial waters, arguing that their maps and surveys place the island within Ugandan territory. The Ugandan government has, at times, stationed police and military forces on the island, justifying their presence as a way to regulate fishing activities and prevent illegal fishing practices. Ugandan authorities have also imposed taxes and fishing permits on Kenyan fishermen, which has further escalated tensions between the two countries. Tensions and clashes. Over the years, the dispute over Migingo Island has led to several confrontations between Kenyan fishermen and Ugandan security forces. There have been reports of harassment, arrests, and confiscation of fishing equipment by Ugandan authorities. Kenyan fishermen claim that Ugandan forces often demand bribes or impose unfair restrictions, making it difficult for them to operate freely. At times, diplomatic efforts have been made to resolve the issue, with both countries agreeing to conduct joint surveys to determine the true owner of the island. However, these efforts have not led to a clear resolution, as both sides continue to interpret the findings differently. The dispute over Migingo Island is not just about a small piece of land. It represents larger issues of territorial integrity, national pride, and economic control. Neither country wants to be seen as weak or willing to give up territory, making negotiations challenging. Furthermore, the local fishing community has become trapped in this conflict, as they are the ones directly affected by the ongoing power struggle between Kenya and Uganda. Despite its small size, Migingo Island holds immense economic value, primarily due to its rich fishing waters. The island is located in Lake Victoria, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world and a key economic resource for the surrounding countries, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. The primary economic driver of the region is fishing, particularly the highly valuable Nile perch, which has turned Migingo into a hotspot for trade and competition. The fishing industry and Nile perch. One of the main reasons for the economic importance of Migingo Island is the presence of Nile perch, a large predatory fish that is in high demand both locally and internationally. Nile perch is widely exported to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, where it is used for food production. The fish fetches high prices in the market, making it a lucrative business for fishermen and traders. Over the years, other parts of Lake Victoria have experienced overfishing, leading to a decline in fish populations. However, the deep waters around Migingo Island continue to provide an abundant supply of Nile perch, making the area highly desirable for fishing communities. As a result, thousands of fishermen from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania have flocked to the island, turning it into a bustling economic center despite its extremely small size. Competition and economic tensions. Because of the high profitability of fishing in the waters around Migingo, there is intense competition among fishermen. Kenyan fishermen have historically operated in these waters, but Uganda has also sought to control access to the fishing grounds. This has led to conflicts, with Ugandan authorities imposing fishing licenses, permits, and taxes on fishermen operating near the island. The Ugandan government claims that these measures are necessary to regulate fishing activities and prevent overfishing. However, Kenyan fishermen argue that these taxes and restrictions amount to economic exploitation, as they believe the waters around Migingo belong to Kenya. The dispute has made it difficult for fishermen to operate freely, with frequent arrests, equipment confiscation, and accusations of illegal fishing adding to the tensions. Migingo as a trade and economic hub. Beyond fishing, Migingo Island has also become a miniature economic hub. Due to the large population of fishermen, small-scale businesses have emerged on the island to support the fishing industry. These include fish processing and drying businesses that prepare the fish for export, small shops and markets that sell essential goods such as food, fishing gear, and household supplies, bars, lodges, and entertainment spots that cater to the fishermen and traders living on the island, boat repair and maintenance services, which are essential for fishermen who rely on boats to access deeper waters. Despite its economic vibrancy, the island lacks proper infrastructure. There is no electricity grid, clean water supply, or proper waste management system, making life on the island difficult. However, Due to the potential for making money, many fishermen and traders continue to endure the harsh conditions in order to benefit from the thriving fish trade, revenue generation, and government interests. Both Kenya and Uganda have a strong interest in controlling Migingo Island because of the economic benefits it provides. The fishing industry around the island generates millions of dollars annually, making it an important source of revenue for local and national economies. For Uganda, imposing fishing licenses and patrols allows them to collect revenue and regulate fishing activities. For Kenya, maintaining control over the island means protecting its fishermen's rights and economic interests. Both governments want to benefit from the fishing industry, which is why neither is willing to easily give up their claim over the island. The territorial dispute over Migingo Island has led to persistent conflicts and tensions between Kenyan fishermen and Ugandan authorities, as well as between the governments of both nations. This tiny island, which is home to only a few hundred people, has become a major point of contention due to the economic benefits of its fishing waters. The ongoing struggle for control has resulted in arrests, intimidation, military presence, and diplomatic disagreements, making Migingo one of the most volatile areas in Lake Victoria. Frequent clashes between fishermen and security forces. One of the main sources of conflict on Migingo Island is the constant clashes between Kenyan fishermen and Ugandan security forces. Ugandan authorities often conduct patrols around the island, claiming they are enforcing fishing regulations and preventing illegal activities. However, Kenyan fishermen argue that these patrols are meant to harass and intimidate them, as Uganda seeks to establish control over the island's fishing resources. There have been numerous reports of Ugandan officers arresting Kenyan fishermen, confiscating their fishing gear, and demanding fines or bribes in exchange for their release. Kenyan fishermen frequently complain about being forced to pay illegal taxes or fishing fees to continue operating in waters that they believe belong to Kenya. These actions have fueled resentment among the fishing communities and contributed to rising tensions between the two nations. The role of military and police forces. Both Kenya and Uganda have deployed security forces to Migingo at different times, further increasing hostilities. In several instances, Ugandan police and military officers have been stationed on the island, raising Kenyan concerns about a foreign military presence within what they claim as their territory. The presence of armed officers has created a tense environment, where fishermen feel they are constantly being watched and controlled. Kenya, in response, has also sent police forces to patrol the island and protect its citizens from what it sees as Ugandan interference. At times, both Kenyan and Ugandan security officers have occupied the island simultaneously, leading to a highly militarized situation in a space that is already extremely small and overcrowded. The standoff has resulted in instances where Kenyan and Ugandan officers have confronted each other, raising fears of an all-out conflict. Escalation of diplomatic disputes. The territorial dispute over Migingo has not only caused conflicts on the ground, but has also led to diplomatic tensions between Kenya and Uganda. The issue has been raised multiple times in bilateral meetings, regional conferences, and international discussions, but a permanent solution remains elusive. Several attempts have been made to resolve the issue through diplomatic negotiations, including joint surveys of the island to determine its rightful ownership. However, these efforts have largely failed to produce a clear resolution, as both countries interpret the findings differently. Whenever a diplomatic agreement seems close, new conflicts emerge between fishermen and security forces, reigniting hostilities. The situation has also led to public outcries and protests in both countries. In Kenya, citizens and politicians have called on the government to take stronger action against Uganda, accusing it of illegally occupying Kenyan territory. Similarly, in Uganda, some political leaders argue that Migingo is part of their country and that they have the right to regulate activities around it. These political statements have further complicated diplomatic efforts, as neither government wants to be seen as weak or willing to give up territory. Impact on local fishermen and communities. For the fishing communities living on Migingo Island, the ongoing conflict has created a climate of fear and instability. Fishermen are often caught in the middle of the dispute, facing harassment, economic losses, and uncertainty about their future. Many of them continue to operate in the area despite the risks because Migingo's waters provide some of the best fishing opportunities in Lake Victoria. The constant conflicts also make it difficult for businesses and traders who depend on the fish trade. Many of them have to deal with frequent disruptions, unpredictable regulations, and demands for bribes from different authorities. Some fishermen have even abandoned the island due to the insecurity and economic challenges caused by the dispute. The tensions on Migingo Island reflect broader issues of border disputes, economic competition, and regional instability in East Africa. Until a lasting solution is found, the small island will likely continue to be a flashpoint for conflict, affecting both the livelihoods of local fishermen and the diplomatic relations between Kenya and Uganda. Migingo Island, despite being one of the smallest inhabited islands in the world, is home to a large and ever-growing population of fishermen, traders, and security personnel. Measuring only about 2,000 square meters, less than half the size of a football field, the island is densely packed with people, houses, and businesses, creating a unique and challenging living environment. Over the years, the promise of abundant fish stocks, particularly Nile perch, has attracted hundreds of fishermen from Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. Many of them arrived with hopes of making a good income, and as a result, Migingo has transformed from an empty rock in the middle of Lake Victoria into a thriving but congested fishing hub. However, the rapid increase in population has created serious overcrowding issues, making life on the island extremely difficult. Living conditions on Migingo Island. Because of the limited space, every inch of the island is occupied by small structures made of corrugated iron sheets. There are no open spaces or roads, just narrow passageways between closely packed houses, shops, and fishing stations. The houses are tiny, poorly ventilated, and extremely close to each other, forcing many residents to live in cramped and uncomfortable conditions. With such a dense population, basic services such as sanitation, clean water, and waste disposal are almost non-existent. There is no proper sewage system, and waste is often dumped into the lake, posing serious environmental and health risks. The lack of clean drinking water means residents either rely on rainwater or fetch water from the lake, which may be contaminated with waste and pollutants. This has led to frequent cases of waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid. The island also has no medical facilities, which means that when residents fall ill or suffer injuries, they must travel by boat to the nearest mainland towns in Kenya or Uganda for treatment. In emergencies, the lack of immediate healthcare services can be life-threatening. Lack of infrastructure and public services. Due to its disputed status and remote location, Migingo has little to no government infrastructure. There are no roads, electricity grids, schools, or hospitals on the island. The only sources of power are small generators and solar panels, which are mostly owned by private individuals or businesses. Electricity is available only for a few hours each day, and many residents cannot afford to use it regularly. Since there are no schools, children living on the island must travel to the mainland for education, making it difficult for families to raise children in such conditions. The lack of social amenities means that most of the residents are adult fishermen and traders, who focus solely on their businesses and economic survival. Overcrowding and its effect on crime and security. With so many people living in such a small, congested area, tensions often arise. Disputes over fishing territories, business deals, and personal conflicts sometimes lead to violence and crime. The presence of both Kenyan and Ugandan security forces has created a highly militarized environment, but law enforcement remains weak due to jurisdictional disputes. There have been reports of fights, theft, and even violent clashes among residents, sometimes fueled by alcohol and frustration over the harsh living conditions. The lack of a clear legal system on the island makes resolving disputes difficult, as both Kenyan and Ugandan laws apply inconsistently depending on who is in control at a given time. Despite these challenges, people continue to flock to Migingo because of its economic opportunities. For many fishermen, the chance to catch and sell Nile perch is worth enduring the harsh and overcrowded conditions. However, as the population continues to grow, the island's limited resources and lack of infrastructure will only worsen the problem, making it even more difficult for residents to survive. Migingo Island, despite its small size, is a highly active fishing hub with a significant human presence. The rapid population growth and intensive fishing activities have led to severe environmental degradation, affecting both the island itself and the surrounding waters of Lake Victoria. The absence of proper waste management, overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction has raised serious concerns about the island's long-term sustainability and the health of the lake's ecosystem. Overfishing and declining fish stocks. The primary economic activity on Migingo Island is fishing, particularly the capture of Nile perch. The demand for this species in international markets, including Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, has encouraged intensive fishing practices in the waters surrounding the island. However, the growing number of fishermen, combined with the use of illegal fishing methods, has led to overfishing in these waters. Many fishermen use unsustainable techniques such as undersized fishing nets, which capture juvenile fish before they can reproduce, fishing at breeding grounds, which disrupts natural fish population growth, use of chemicals and destructive fishing gear, which can harm aquatic life and degrade water quality. As a result, fish stocks have declined in many parts of Lake Victoria, forcing fishermen to travel further into deeper waters or use illegal fishing methods to maintain their income. This not only threatens the long-term sustainability of the fishing industry, but also creates conflicts between different fishing communities over access to resources. Water pollution and waste management issues. One of the biggest environmental challenges facing Migingo Island is pollution. The island lacks a proper sewage system, and due to overcrowding, there is nowhere to dispose of human and industrial waste properly. As a result, most waste is dumped directly into the lake, leading to serious water contamination. The key sources of pollution include human waste and sewage, which are often discharged into the lake due to the lack of toilets or sanitation facilities. Plastic waste from fishing gear, food packaging, and household items, which accumulates in the water and along the shoreline. Oil spills and fuel leakage from boats, which can harm aquatic life and pollute the water. This pollution has contributed to the growth of harmful algae blooms, which reduce oxygen levels in the water and can lead to fish deaths. Additionally, many people on the island rely on the lake for drinking, cooking, and cleaning, meaning that contaminated water poses a direct health risk to the residents. Deforestation and habitat destruction. Although Migingo Island itself is mostly rocky and lacks vegetation, the surrounding lake ecosystem includes aquatic plants and other natural habitats that are crucial for maintaining ecological balance. However, the high fishing pressure and human activities have contributed to the destruction of these habitats. Fishermen often cut down vegetation along nearby shores for firewood and boat repairs, disrupting local ecosystems. The destruction of breeding grounds and nesting sites for fish and birds further threatens biodiversity in the region. Climate change and its effects on Lake Victoria. Environmental degradation around Migingo Island is also being worsened by climate change. Rising temperatures and changing rainfall patterns are affecting water levels, fish populations, and lake currents, making fishing more unpredictable. Additionally, increased evaporation and pollution have led to a decline in water quality, further threatening the livelihoods of those dependent on the lake. As climate change continues to alter the natural balance of Lake Victoria, it becomes even more crucial to implement sustainable fishing practices and environmental conservation measures. However, the ongoing territorial dispute and lack of clear governance on Migingo Island make coordinated environmental protection efforts difficult. Without urgent intervention, the combination of overfishing, pollution, and habitat destruction could lead to an ecological disaster, impacting both local communities and the broader East African region that depends on Lake Victoria. The ongoing territorial dispute, overcrowding, environmental degradation, and economic conflicts surrounding Migingo Island have made it a highly complex issue that requires a long-term and sustainable solution. Given its small size but immense economic importance, both Kenya and Uganda must work together to develop diplomatic, economic, and environmental strategies that benefit both nations and the fishing communities that depend on the island. There are several possible solutions that could help address the challenges facing Migingo, including clear territorial agreements, improved governance, better infrastructure, environmental conservation, and sustainable fishing practices. However, implementing these solutions requires political will, cooperation, and long-term planning. 1. Resolving the territorial dispute through diplomacy. One of the biggest barriers to stability on Migingo Island is the unresolved territorial dispute between Kenya and Uganda. While both countries claim ownership of the island, the lack of a clear legal and political resolution has led to frequent conflicts, arrests, and diplomatic tensions. To end the dispute, both governments must engage in serious diplomatic negotiations based on historical and legal evidence, reviewing colonial-era maps and agreements to determine the rightful owner of the island. Joint management agreements. Even if ownership is not resolved, Kenya and Uganda could agree to co-manage the island, allowing fishermen from both countries to operate freely under a shared regulatory system. Regional and international mediation, involving organizations like the African Union, AU, and East African Community, EAC, to facilitate a peaceful resolution. A clear agreement on ownership and management would reduce tensions, prevent further conflicts, and create a stable environment for economic activities. 2. Establishing proper governance and law enforcement. Currently, Migingo Island suffers from weak governance and legal uncertainty, as both Kenyan and Ugandan authorities claim jurisdiction. This creates confusion for residents and allows for corruption, harassment, and illegal taxation by security forces. A clear and unified governance structure is necessary to ensure fair law enforcement and protection of fishermen's rights. Possible solutions include creating a joint Kenyan-Ugandan administration to regulate fishing, trade, and security in a coordinated manner. Setting up a neutral governing body composed of officials from both countries, ensuring that fishermen are not subjected to arbitrary arrests or multiple taxation systems. Implementing a legal framework that clearly defines the rights and responsibilities of fishermen, traders, and law enforcement agencies on the island. Without proper governance, the island will remain a hotbed of conflict, exploitation, and instability. 3. Improving infrastructure and living conditions. Overcrowding and poor infrastructure on Migingo Island have made living conditions extremely harsh for its residents. Addressing these challenges would improve the quality of life for fishermen and traders while also supporting sustainable economic development. Possible improvements include better sanitation and waste management systems to reduce pollution and prevent the spread of diseases. Reliable, clean water supply to eliminate dependence on contaminated lake water. Solar-powered electricity systems to provide consistent power for homes and businesses. Healthcare and emergency services to address medical needs without requiring travel to the mainland. Developing infrastructure on Migingo would make it a safer, healthier, and more productive environment for its residents. 4. Regulating fishing and preventing overfishing. One of the biggest threats to the economic sustainability of Migingo is overfishing, which has led to declining fish stocks in parts of Lake Victoria. Without proper regulation, Nile perch populations could collapse, destroying the livelihoods of thousands of fishermen and traders. To prevent this, authorities must enforce sustainable fishing practices, such as banning illegal nets and protecting fish breeding areas. Introduce licensing systems that allow only a limited number of fishermen to operate at a given time. Promote alternative income sources, such as fish farming, aquaculture, to reduce pressure on natural fish stocks. By ensuring sustainable fishing, the long-term economic viability of Migingo and Lake Victoria can be secured. 5. Strengthening economic cooperation between Kenya and Uganda. Instead of fighting over Migingo, Kenya and Uganda could benefit more from economic cooperation. The fishing industry generates millions of dollars annually, and both countries have an interest in protecting and profiting from this resource. To achieve this, both governments could create a joint trade agreement that allows fishermen from both countries to operate under equal terms, develop shared fish processing and export facilities, improving economic opportunities for local communities, implement a transparent tax and revenue sharing system, ensuring that both nations benefit without unfair taxation or corruption. Economic cooperation would reduce tensions, improve trade relations, and create a more stable environment for fishing communities. 6. Environmental conservation and sustainable development. The long-term future of Migingo depends on protecting the lake's ecosystem and ensuring that human activities do not irreversibly damage the environment. Conservation efforts should include waste management programs to prevent lake pollution, education initiatives to train fishermen on sustainable fishing techniques, reforestation and habitat protection projects to maintain the ecological balance. Without environmental protection, the natural resources that make Migingo valuable could disappear, leaving both fishermen and the governments of Kenya and Uganda at a loss. 7. Promoting regional stability and conflict prevention. Migingo is just one of many border disputes in East Africa, and its resolution could set a positive precedent for regional peace and cooperation. Addressing this issue fairly and peacefully would strengthen diplomatic ties between Kenya and Uganda, provide a model for resolving other territorial disputes in the region, reduce militarization and conflict, allowing people to focus on economic and social development. A peaceful and cooperative resolution to the Migingo dispute could enhance regional stability, boost economic growth, and improve the lives of thousands of people who depend on Lake Victoria.